Bill, I'd like to ask you about the specifics of this massive move that's necessary toward dealing with climate change. You mentioned in your writing Mark Jacobson, a Stanford professor who's been studying this for years, has come up with a model for how each state in the union could be able to deal with reachable goals. Can you talk about some of the specifics that he has?
So you can't believe how detailed the work that this team at Stanford has done. I mean, if you go into their database and ask how many acres of south-facing roof there are in Alabama that aren't shaded by trees where you could put solar panels, a number pops up. And now the same for most of the countries in the world. And what they demonstrate is that it's within both economic and technical possibility to, by 2030, be getting 80% of our power from renewable energy. It's not easy because the fossil fuel complex is the center of our economy, and there's a huge amount of sunk investment that people would have to write off, but that's a hell of a lot cheaper than the cost of dealing with a planet that no longer works the way it has for the last 10,000 years. And
the industry now, you turn on TV any day and you see their campaign for the energy voter.
Yes. The fossil fuel industry knows that their back is against the wall. They know that they have a losing hand. I mean, look what's going on in the Dakotas. No sane person could look at the pictures that Democracy Now! Provided from the Standing Rock Reservation with dogs sicked on protesters trying to protect their water.
Why don't we go to just a clip of that? This was September 3rd, Labor Day weekend. Native Americans at these massive resistance camps of now thousands did not expect that the Dakota Access Pipeline, the $3.8 billion pipeline, was going to be excavating at this point. It was a holiday weekend. They were going to plant their tribal flags in a ceremony. And what they found shocked them. Bulldozers in full gear. The security guards were there with pepper spray. They assaulted, attacked, tackled the Native Americans, and they sicked dogs on them.
These people were threatening all of us with these dogs, and that woman over there, she was charging them, and it bit somebody right in the face.
The dog has blood in its nose and its mouth.
And she's still standing here threatening you.
Why are you letting her dog go after the protesters? It's covered in blood.
So that was the scene. Describe what is actually taking place here and what is at stake. Why the Dakota Access Pipeline would want to hurt these protesters.
So first thing to understand that what's taking place there is everybody else acknowledging what some of us have known for a long time, which is that frontline communities and particularly indigenous people have been in the forefront of this climate fight. They were in the Keystone fight, and now clearly in the Dakotas, they're holding the line against something that threatens not only their reservation, but threatens the whole planet. We cannot pump more oil. We've got to stop opening up new reserves. Their work there is astonishing. Against all odds, they've been able, at least for the moment, to bring a temporary halt to some of that construction, giving, one hopes, cooler heads a chance to look at the available data and common sense to prevail. Earlier this year, the president said that any new project should have to pass a climate test. There's an even stiffer version of that in the next Democratic platform. This pipeline couldn't pass those climate tests. It should be stopped. Thank heaven for the bravery of those people and really for the environmental justice movement that's sprung up all around the country, not even sprung up. You know, today we're celebrating the 50th anniversary of Uprose, really one of the original seminal environmental justice outfits here in New York. That's where the leadership is coming from, and it's really powerful to see.
What's Hillary Clinton's stance on the Dakota Access Pipeline?
One has no idea. She has so far refused to say anything about it. Let's hope that that changes, because this is not only a practical challenge. At this point, it's a clear moral test. I mean, look, on the long list of oppressed people on this continent, it's, you know, that may be at the absolute top of the list. The idea that we're putting dogs on people in 2016, that we have pictures that look just like the pictures from Birmingham in 1963. That should be enough to cause revulsion among any normal person looking on.
And given the fact that we're still dealing with a Congress controlled by climate change deniers, what do you think could still be done by a president, either President Obama in his last few months or Clinton if she is elected, through executive action to be able to move forward on this issue?
Well, there's certain things that the president can do. And one of them, sort of obvious, straightforward one, is to stop allowing people to drill for oil and gas and mine coal on public land, on federal land in this country. That's something like half the carbon deposits in America are on federal land. The Obama administration finally, late in the game, has stopped allowing new coal leases, at least for the time being. But that should go to fracking and oil wells and everything else. At the very least, we should take public land off the table because the president can do that.
Bill, you've talked in the New York Times about you yourself being persecuted. Can you talk about who has been going after you, photographing you, and what this is all about?
There's an outfit called America Rising Squared or something, some kind of right-wing GOP fossil fuel industry sort of thing. No one quite knows where their money comes from. And they announced earlier in the year that they were going to do opposition research and video tracking on a level that previously had been reserved, as they said, for presidential candidates. So yes, sometimes now, often now in public, there are people following me everywhere with cameras and stuff. I mean, look, it's not a lot of fun, but compared to what's happening to people in other places, I can live with it. It's not like, you know. But
what are they doing exactly?
Well, they're tracking.
This isn't just when you're at a public protest.
No, I give a speech or I'm in the, you know, they follow me, you know, so once or twice I've had to sort of go into the men's room to try and, you know, it's just designed to get in one's head, I guess. And frankly, sometimes it does a little bit. But I really want to say, look, there are environmental activists who are now getting shot in this world on a weekly basis. People in countries that are trying to stop mines, stop pipelines. I mean, it's a great luxury to be in America, at least until we elect Donald Trump, and we don't have to worry quite in those ways. The real point is that the fossil fuel industry will do anything to avoid actually talking about the issue. And the issue is that if they keep their business model going, then the planet tanks. That's where we are.
I wanted to ask you about the role of the organized labor movement. There has been some change over the years in terms of the environmental movement and the trade union movement getting closer together. But on Dakota Access Pipeline, the AFL-CIO has come out in favor of it. Your thoughts on that?
The good news, if you want some, is that a bunch of unions have come out on the right side on this issue, and quite strongly. The communication workers, transport workers, the nurses union, groups like that, and all the kind of caucuses within the AFL for communities of color, for, you know, these are important. One understands why the construction trades want to build pipelines. Look, these are good jobs, and they pay good wages. It's too bad that the world literally can't absorb the carbon that flows through these things, okay? It would be easier for the whole world if physics and chemistry were pliable, easy negotiating partners that we could just say we'd like a few more years of this or whatever. But I do think that this is an important moment for labor as for everybody else. What's going on in the Dakotas is indefensible, just literally indefensible. And what's powerful to see there is the oldest wisdom on this continent matching up perfectly with the newest scientific evidence. That's a powerful combination. I think it'll be powerful enough maybe to overwhelm even the financial might of the fossil fuel industry.
There's been this terrible accident in Hoboken with the train smashing into the Hoboken station when it should have stopped. Now, we don't know what happened to the engineer, the person who was driving. But the question was, why didn't it stop even if something had happened to him, a heart attack or whatever? We have enormous investment in the highways of this country. The whole issue of investment in mass transit, I mean, the discussion on all of the networks nonstop, you know, was it terrorism? Well, no, it wasn't terrorism. But the question of where is the investment in mass transit?
Well, let's talk about investment in infrastructure generally. I mean, the great opportunity in the first months of a Clinton administration would be a serious grand bargain for serious investment in infrastructure, especially around renewable energy, but around mass transit, around all kinds of things.
That also means massive number of jobs.
Exactly right. Exactly right. This is the future that Bernie Sanders was talking about, and it's going to take, we got to put serious numbers on the table. You know, the talk in the moment, sometimes Secretary Clinton talk about $250 billion. It's got to be many multiples of that because we are deep, deep in the hole. And when people say we don't have the money, well, at the moment, money's cheap for a lot of reasons. What we really don't have the money for is somehow trying to deal with a world where the ocean is rising. You've seen in the last few months an increased focus on what's going to happen here in Manhattan over the next decades as the sea level rises. Think about, just in this one island, how much economic wealth is at risk if we let the planet keep going on the path it is going on now.
When you mentioned this issue of this massive investment that's needed immediately, interestingly, when all the candidates came into the New York Daily News editorial board earlier this year, they all talked quietly, although they don't talk about it publicly, that it's commonly accepted that one of the things the new Congress will do is work out the amnesty for corporations that have trillions of dollars parked overseas because they don't want to have to pay the corporate tax. So they all are expecting a huge infusion of money. The only question is, at what percent will they allow the amnesty, which is what it is, for all these corporations to bring their money home? And that's where the government, that's where Hillary expects to get all her infrastructure money. That's where the Republicans expect to be able to cut taxes, all on the basis of this one, well, it's not the one time, it's the second major amnesty to corporations.
Yes, I mean, there are ironies aplenty in that whole scheme. If we're going to do it, let's make sure that the get-out-of-jail-free card isn't free, that it comes with a hefty price tag. Because when we're dealing with the infrastructure challenges, especially around renewable energy that we have, you know, $100 billion doesn't begin to cut it. I mean, we need actual big money, the kind of money that we've been spending on, say, the military for the last decades. That's the kind of money that we need to face this challenge.
So about a year ago, almost exactly, you were there in Vermont, in your hometown, standing with a sign. You got arrested for this, I think, in front of your Exxon Mobil station that said, "This pump temporarily closed because Exxon Mobil lied about climate." Now, in our headlines today, a new federal lawsuit targets Exxon Mobil, what advocates say is the first legal action targeting the oil giant for its decades-long cover-up of climate change. Talk about this.
It's been a troubling year for Exxon. Just about exactly a year ago, Inside Climate News, the LA Times, the Columbia Journalism School started releasing probably the most important investigative reporting we've seen in a very long time. What it demonstrated was that our most important and largest fossil fuel company, indeed for much of history the largest company on Earth, had known everything there was to know about climate change, had used it in its own internal calculations to make sure they were prepared, you know, building their drilling rigs to cope with sea level rise, and at the same time lying to the rest of us, setting up this architecture of deceit and denial and disinformation. Well, I wanted to make sure, I wanted to get arrested because I wanted to make sure those stories didn't disappear, you know, in the daily wave of news that we all live under. And other people did similar things, and thank heavens people started listening. Eric Schneiderman in New York State, the Attorney General, quite bravely took on Exxon. He was followed by the AG in Massachusetts, Maura Healey. Last week, the SEC announced that they were joining this investigation. By the time you get the SEC on board, well, I mean, I guess they've made a federal case out of it. I mean, this is important. In fact, it's pretty remarkable, and it's a sign of just how far into this crisis we are.
But not only are these companies lying to the public, they're also lying to their shareholders in terms of what is the actual value of the company if they understand what is ahead in terms of global warming.
That's right. In fact, there's a story today that indicates that Exxon, over the last 7 or 8 years, has quadrupled its holdings in the tar sands in Canada. That it's now 35% of their reserves are in those tar sands. This is in Inside Climate News today. The idea that they're going to be able to get all that oil out seems unlikely to me. I mean, we beat the Keystone Pipeline. There's unbelievable opposition to the Energy East and Kinder Morgan pipelines in Canada. If their predictions for their economic future have been predicated on the fact that they're going to be a tar sands giant, well, that may not have been a very good bet.
And finally, the Koch brothers. I mean, a lot of the Republican establishment has given up on Donald Trump, but they haven't given up on the other races. Can you talk about the amount of money that the Koch brothers are pouring in right now to try to defeat candidates who are deeply concerned about climate change?
I don't know the exact numbers, but apparently with people, people not spending their money on Trump, they're spending it down ballot. And in places like in the Ohio Senate race, there's been a spigot of money turned on to benefit the fossil fuel industry's sort of hired employees who are, running. That's sad on a number of counts. This is the place where things like Citizens United, where the rubber really meets the road, because we cannot afford another 2 years or another 4 years of inaction on climate. We've had it for a quarter century, and it's yielded us the highest temperatures in human civilization.
Bill McKibben, we want to thank you for being with us. We will link to your pieces in the New Republic, A World at War. We're under attack from climate change, and our only hope is to mobilize like we did in World War II, and recalculating the climate math. Bill McKibben is co-founder of 350.org and Schumann Scholar at Middlebury College in Vermont. This is